Welcome to Side by Side, a podcast where I, Robert Kwong, take you inside conversations with artists, creatives, healers, and warriors taking the charge in their transformational story. Please say hello to Juanita Molano Parra, a coach who works with individuals and teams to find the catalyst towards their goals and vision. In English, Spanish, and French, by the way. In this episode, we explore her journey from corporate finance to personal development, from Colombia to Indiana, and what it's like being in between worlds and cultures. You can connect with Juanita through her website, linked in the show notes at jumpcoaching.co, and through her social media platforms, such as Instagram and LinkedIn. Thank you, Juanita, for joining me. We usually talk pretty frequently, but this is a slightly different way of us connecting, so I appreciate you being willing to play.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I think you're right. We do talk. We talk at least maybe like once a week, right? But I think also when we talk in a different container than the podcast, we also end up having a little bit different conversations. So I'm excited for what today's going to be too.
Well, as you know, I'm really curious about people's origin stories and their journey. And I'm really excited to be speaking with you just because you have such a different experience than maybe my growing up experience.
Mm.
You were born in Colombia, South America, correct?
Yes, in Colombia, I was born and raised in Bogota, capital, big city, big city. Uh, Now I've realized a little chaotic, but not terribly. I mean, I think enough chaos for my taste, probably. Too much traffic for my taste, for sure, but everything else good.
Well, that makes sense why you were gravitating towards New York City later on then.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I miss. So I live in Indianapolis now, and um, I miss, it's weird. I miss the city. I miss the movement. I miss the energy, both like from New York, from Bogota. I just miss that kind of fire movement. And I also really like that indie chill. So,
Yeah, I sort of get that, kind of like wanting the best of both worlds in some ways.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
so you grew up in a very big capital city
Hmm.
where there's a lot of traffic, a lot of commerce, a lot of. Actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but Colombia is quite diverse in its demographic, right?
It is. I only pause because it is diverse and there's a lot of challenges around diversity too. Different from the here, I think it's interesting. Sometimes we talk about DEI, like diversity, equity, inclusion, but in particular, well, no, actually, all three letters, uh, as like a thing, but that thing is very different depending on where you are. Like a conversation around diversity and exclusion, the way that it is here in the US. Yes, exclusion also happens in Colombia. It's just different ways in which it happens. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of why I took a pause because there is diversity, but there's a lot of in terms of I'm going to say race. It's very you can see the separation across different regions, and so across different regions, across different social economical um, ranges. I don't know how you say that. Social economical brackets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
Um, and so you see that different, it starts different, and it's something that we are challenged with right now. And actually, this morning I was listening to a news, like a short news from Colombia, and they were talking about how there's a new government just came in. Inauguration was back in August. First president from the left ever, which in a country like Colombia is a vice president. She is an Afro-Colombian woman, um, and she's from the West region. So the Pacific, that region, there's a lot more Afro population. A lot more. It's also parts of that regions that are kind of forgotten, and there's a lot of poverty, just all these things. And so, anyway, just super brief context, but all this to say, I was listening this morning. Yes, there is a lot of diversity in Colombia, but they are in the new government. They're creating something. It's called the Ministry of Equality,
Wow.
something like that. And Francia Marquez, who is our vice president, she would be heading that. And uh, she has very strong initiatives around, and not just initiatives, she has a strong commitment to equity. Um, Always has. She's a social leader, and that's kind of like she has a lot of things, and so like she's done a lot of things, but equity is a big commitment in her world, and has been. Like, you could see it through the campaign, you could see it in her outfits, you could see it in her acceptance speech, different things.
Yeah, thank you for giving a little glimpse into Colombia, and particularly for those of us who have never been to that country or
Yeah,
never even been to South America, period.
yeah.
When did you first start living in the United States?
I moved to the US a little over 9 years ago. Initially, I came here for business school. I went to Stern, to NYU, uh, York, and I did my 2 years of business school, work 2 more years. Was living in New York, working for a subsidiary of Amazon. And then after that was when I moved here to Indy. So yeah, it's going to be a decade next year, which feels crazy.
How time flies.
Yeah.
What was the biggest adjustment or some of the biggest adjustments in living in the United States compared to Colombia?
I don't know if adjustments, but I think things that I don't know if to say that I didn't expect, or things that kind of shocked me or confused me. Because I'll say, I think, I don't know if, so I grew up watching a lot of TV from the US, TV, movies, music. And so there were, I think that one to Latin America is a lot closer culturally to the US than it would be to somewhere like China or India, right? Like, culturally, I mean, in some things, I think that's a whole other conversation now that I think about it. But at a high level, like it's not that different in many things. And so, think between that and taking in so much media from the US, there were a lot of things that I was ready for, that like just were. Some things were easier, like the subway works, which is fantastic. Um, Amazon is such an easy thing. Um, like, yeah, I think like those things, I don't know if there were a lot of adjustments. That being said, there's things that random things that confuse me in the country. Some are kind of like funny, some are not at all funny and very controversial. But so, things that I think are funny and still blow my mind. One, people here don't know their blood type. Do you know your blood type?
I don't know my blood type. No, that's true. Like
How?
that's not something we think
Robert?
about.
Why? Why? This makes no sense. And
It's
so I've
oh,
told
that's
my
funny.
parents about this because my husband doesn't know his blood type, and my parents cannot compute. They just, they still don't, it's not that they don't understand, they just simply cannot compute. It makes no sense that you wouldn't know your blood type, even less that your parents wouldn't know your blood type. Like, nonsensical.
That's true.
In Colombia, you know your blood type. Everybody knows their blood type. You get it, like, you get an exam when you're born, it goes on your records, it goes on your ID, it goes everywhere. Like, everybody knows their blood type. That, I think it's insane. And it's such a random thing, but like things I just
Yeah,
can't compute
fascinating.
and never imagine would happen. With that goes the ID. In Colombia, we all have a national ID. Like, I thought that was normal. And I thought that was like something that all countries did, especially, I mean, the US is like the most powerful country, it's the most developed country, it's all these things, but there's no national ID. Makes no sense to me. No sense to me. Still cannot understand it. So things like that, that are just like this little things that for me are so basic. And I totally take for granted because it's just kind of like the way that my society works. And then coming here and it's like, oh, wait, like you don't have an ID? Oh, you can't figure out who has voted and who hasn't because you don't know have an ID? Oh, vote. Okay. Okay, great, 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 great. And you know blood type on top of everything. Fantastic. So those are just, I think, like I think it's kind of funny because a little nonsensical. Um, but then other things that I think are more controversial and are just the subject of many debates and political issues here, like drugs. I think people make assumptions because I'm from Colombia, as in, like, I don't know. I mean, I get this jokes. I think less now. I would get this jokes often in terms of like, oh, did I bring any goods with me? Or, oh, what does my family do? Or jokes that are
Mm-hmm.
like not really funny, but laugh. What else can you do? Um, but drugs are not as prevalent in terms of consumption as they are here.
In Colombia compared to the, yeah, gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And so that for me was a big shock coming in and realizing how how common it is for people to do drugs, all sorts of drugs. And you can go in a debate like, well, all drugs are created equal, and like, what? How is weed different than alcohol? And da 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 da. And like, all, I mean, sure, fine, no, whatever. Like, it's just a really big shock because I didn't expect that.
Yeah, that is a much longer conversation, but yeah, money
Yeah.
moves is all I'll say. Yeah.
It's just, and it's very normalized in a way that I didn't experience before. And so that, um,
In
yeah,
most
that was
Asian
what
countries, that's also the case. It's all, yeah.
that it's normalized.
No, that they're just far more illegalized and restricted than, yeah.
Well, it's not just the legal part of it, but the I don't know how to call this, like the cultural relationship to it. Like, of course, people do drugs in Colombia. Like, there's many people that do drugs, and there's people that do different drugs. There's people that do drugs everywhere. I just had never had it close to me. And now I have. Like, there's many people. I mean, when I was in business school, there were like a lot of different people that were doing a lot of different drugs. And I was just kind of shocked. Again, not, and I'm not gonna say like because it's good or because it's bad or this drugs are good and better than, like, again, a whole rabbit hole of a conversation. It was just a big shock because culturally that wasn't the case for me before.
Yeah. There are lots of adjustments and unsuspecting things. And when I first came to the United States at age 9, there were lots of things like that. And even most recently, it was like somebody made a joke not too long ago when the pandemic started. It was like, oh, I thought only Asian people wore masks or something like that. Because it was not,
Mm.
it was more of a shock for many people coming from Asian countries that we were not masked in the way that they would be in handling with environmental impact and all of that. Yeah, it's funny the little things that are so different from each other. So yeah, thank you for sharing some of your perspectives on that.
What was a big adjustment or a change for you when you came, Robert?
I mean, it's pretty basic, but the biggest change would be language because I didn't
Mm.
speak any English when I first came here. Did you speak English, some English when you first came here? You did.
Yeah, 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 fluently.
Okay.
But I mean, I came a lot older.
Yeah. So you studied English in Colombia. Is that correct?
So I studied English at school. I started English, I think. I went to a French school. So I was doing French since age 4. I started English, I think, at age maybe 10 or 11. And like I said, I was kind of addicted to TV, to be honest. And it paid off, but yeah.
So, growing up in China, I didn't have as much access to international
Mhm.
media. And so my exposure was fairly limited, except for like, I don't know, Home Alone or something like that.
Mhm.
And then coming here, I had to learn the language from scratch, including all of the nuance and the context. And um, I was in ESL up until like late middle school. And I would say my relationship to English, the biggest shift for me was when I started writing. But before then, my relationship to language felt very like, well, second language, because it was,
Mm,
that's what it was. So I think the biggest adjustment was everything related to communication, just because I literally didn't know any English when I first came here.
yeah.
And yeah, it changes the way how you navigate, who you rely on, who you listen to, everything.
Wow. Why did it make a difference when you started writing?
It made me think about language in a different way. It was like it kind of rewired my brain in some way. And I don't know if it's like because I was doing something creative, like storytelling, writing.
Huh.
That's what I was doing. But then I started feeling like I had more ownership over my English. But before then,
Ah,
it almost didn't feel very concrete because when I started creative writing, it was about my relationship to English, not English speaking skills. Does that make sense? Like
yeah.
it was about my context to the language, nothing else. So, um, anyway, so that's a little bit about me. Thanks for asking that question.
Interesting. Well, you made me think. I don't know if this is connected at all, but what you made me think of was like you can write by yourself. I mean, you can technically, but you cannot really talk by yourself.
I would say overall conversational speaking is easier back then, but it
Yeah.
was almost like I had more command over the language once I started, or like I felt that
Once you
way.
were writing it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was
Yeah.
like I had to take time to like think about it and all of that, and that's kind of what got me
Yeah.
interested. But actually, it was television as well. I wanted to do screenwriting at the time because I
Oh,
wanted to be
wow.
a storyteller. So um, that's when I started getting interested. To be like, well, maybe I can try doing some of my creative writing just for fun and things like that.
So interesting.
So from making adjustments from Colombia coming to the United States, you eventually got your MBA from NYU Stern School of Business, and you
Mhm.
worked in corporate finance. When did you start taking an interest in things related to coaching or personal development?
So I took an interest in personal development a little before. I think like we're really actually just a year before I moved to the US, where I had started working with someone um who did a lot of work around personal development, basically. And so she kind of introduced me to different concepts and books, and really, I feel like opened up that door for me. And so I had started thinking about that. She had been a good support at that point. And so I would think often about like just like, oh, it's so nice that I get access to a support like this. I think it would be nice for more people to have access to things like this. And that was just kind of in the back of my mind as I was going through business school. Some of the things I enjoyed the most were having conversations with people. Were like, I think talking about what people like, what they wanted to do, about what they dreamed of doing for a career, about this company they would love to launch, about how they would like to have an impact through social enterprise, about their challenges in figuring out their recruiting, like any sort of thing that I just actually really enjoyed talking about. Um, and so I think that was another, like just different seeds. And then I think throughout my career, be it like the time that I was working here or the time that I was working in Colombia, I was always in corporate. And there was always kind of I worked in finance. I worked a lot in, like, I would say finance planning or finance operations, sales finance, like any sort of thing that was like more numbers, process, reporting, that kind of thing. Uh, but there was always something that didn't fully click when it was related to the humans, like the people aspect of it, right? Like, because you can engineer a whole process, you can create all these reports, but in the end, like a company at large, like it is about the people, because the people are the people that make the organization and do all these things. And so one way or another, I had, I think, an interest in leadership. I don't think from the beginning I knew what that was. um yeah, actually, now that I think about it, I didn't have that word for it. I thought about leadership as this like ethereal thing for like the executive suite, or uh not as something that like everybody in an organization did. So thinking about people in an organization, and so thinking about leadership, conversations I had through business school, and then this starting of personal development, I think all those seeds started to add up to when I decided to really explore, well, what could I do in leadership? And I think my way into that was via coaching.
What did you get out of your coaching training experience? Since we have, just FYI to listeners, we have both gone through coaching training. That's kind of how we met. What did you
Yeah.
get out of your experience in that type of training?
Oh my God, so much. So I think maybe some of the main things were the idea of choice. And so I know that can be taken to a bad extreme of, yeah, I think that can be taken to a bad extreme. But the idea of choice, like you have a choice in your life, the idea of responsibility from that sense. And not responsibility as blame or shame, but responsibility as that, as choice, as driving your own life, as taking ownership. And so that, I think, was one of the biggest thing. um I think too, the we talk a lot about this idea of completion in the program, which it's really, I think about it as kind of like dropping bags, right? Like we're all carrying all this baggage from like forever. And so it's like dropping bags along the way, like letting go of burdensome energy around an event, a person, a circumstance. And I found that to be incredibly powerful. It was actually, I think, one of the things that really helped me get more settled here in Indy. Once I really got complete and was able to let go of all the attachments, of all the this should be this way, this should be that way, and I should be in this place and I shouldn't be in this place, and just all these things around it. And that allowed me to actually be like, oh, I don't like it here. And then eventually, oh, maybe I could like it here. And now I do. So choice and responsibility, completion, I think those things were really big because, I mean, to this day, they're pieces that impact my day to day life.
And you have on your website jumping coach. Wait, is it jumping coach? Is jumping coach?
Jump coaching.
Jump coaching.
Yeah,
Apologies. We will have the right
very
link in
good.
the program notes, people.
Good. Thanks.
You have a free workbook. It's called the Life Planter. Do you want to tell
Oh,
people
yeah.
a little bit about what that's for and how they can use it?
Yeah, totally. So that is a combination of things that I really like. So I love stationery more than anything. How to go into a state or paper store, notebook store. Oh God, yeah, it really gives me so much happiness. French
I can tell by
stationery.
your wallpaper behind you right now.
I know, I know. Yeah, French stationery and Japanese stationery. Oh my God, best notebooks ever. But I digress. So I love stationery. I love having like tangible things to write on and to reflect on, and I like the idea of kind of guided self-reflection. And so I was talking with my designer. Her name is Sabina, and Sabina too, but she's actually good at designing it. I'm only good at consuming it. And so we had talked about it for a while, and I had this idea for last end of the year of kind of a self-reflection, right? Like we close the year? What do we want to celebrate? What do we want to let go of? What do we want for next year? And more personal and intentional than let's set, what is it? New Year resolutions. And more of a like, hey, just let's look at myself. And so I wrote that out, the life planner, and Sabina designed it. And once it was done, we realized this doesn't have to just be a New Year thing. It's really something you can take and use at any point. The name came actually from my friends. They're the ones that name everything. So I reached out to them like, I'm creating this thing. I don't know what it should called. They came up with the life planner because the idea is that it's like something to take a look at your life and really plant it. The stuff like the seeds that you've collected along the way, of what is it that you want to put to it, and of letting it be like, what is it that you want it to grow into. And so if you go to my website, it's jumpcoaching.co. And if we subscribe to my newsletter, you'll get the life planner for free. And then you'll get my newsletter every 2 weeks, which is kind of like business leadership insights, short and sweet, resources, that kind of thing.
Yes, everyone, please check out Juanita's website, her free workbook, and also stay connected with her and her work by subscribing to her newsletter. Please do that. Yeah, is there anything else that you want to share about, for example, your work right now, or who you typically work with if people wanted to work with you?
So I love to work with multicultural, kind, soulful business creators. And really, I enjoy supporting them in connecting to their self. And I think of their self like capital S, what is important to them, their values, their passions, their fears. And really from that, build a super strong foundation that they build their business and their leadership on. And I find that to be really important. I've seen that with people, but especially I've seen that with myself. When my foundation, when that core of who I am and how I take care and nurture myself, it really, whatever I build on top is a little wonky. And so I work with people on building both that foundation and then the beautiful mansions that they want to build on top, be it their business, be it their leadership, their career. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for spending time with me today, Juanita. It was so nice to kind of chat with you in a very different way from our normal agenda-driven calls. It was so nice to truly get to know you in a different way.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, Robert.
Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to connect with me, please reach out at www.robertkwongcoaching.com. And also feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at robertkwongcoaching.